So, a few interesting points perhaps about our purchase and going this way. I was definitely looking at schoolies, and that had kind of been my dream, and I had scoped them out on Pinterest and saved different buses and ideas that I wanted to do. Brian kind of laughed at me and said, "Where will we work on it? Where will we keep it?" It was just really hard to wrap his mind around because it was a big project if we took that on. Ultimately, I did something I never do. I went to YouTube and I typed in and searched for why not to get a schoolie, which typically if I want something, I don't want to hear the negatives. I only want to hear the positives, and I go for it. And within about 10 minutes, I understood that schoolie life was not for me, largely because the brief videos that I found mentioned that schoolies are great on even ground, but depending on the bus, the length, the size and such, it'll go the speed limit on level ground, but as soon as there's an incline, it's a huge problem. And that itself was a problem because I wasn't just going to be driving it around neighborhoods as a regular school bus would drive. I wanted to travel in it. Largely, I think the issue was who to work on them. If you have an issue with your engine, if it breaks down, anything like that, you can't just pull it up to a Ford dealership and say, "Hey, why is my check engine light on?" Folks that work on them when they are school buses will not work on them when they are no longer school buses. So it's usually a large truck type of mechanic that has to see them for semis, for large campers, things of that nature, and they may be few and far between, and that was an issue. My dream was crushed, and I don't recall what I actually searched that night, but I went home thinking about that and realizing that van life was a thing. And suddenly, I guess my new dream was born. I started looking for vans. It was definitely more acceptable perhaps to Brian that it's a smaller vehicle. However, it was still the issue of now vans are actually more expensive than buses to purchase, and they may be smaller, but they are harder to work with because they're tighter with some interesting angles and such inside. He was digging in about we will not use it. Why? When will we use it? We had a camper, we used it twice. Valid point. I thought I could build it out slowly. It would take me a couple years anyway to get it how I wanted it, with self-converting it. And in that time, the kids would graduate, we'd then be able to use it and so forth. He did not necessarily agree. There was not an issue with availability as much as there is now. At that point in time, we looked at a couple vans. We weren't really sure which model we were looking for. It was really just what was available, I would say. Would it be a Transit, which is taller? Would it be a Sprinter, which is longer? Or a Promaster, which is wider? Those are the big three. We went and looked at a Promaster, which was a hotel shuttle, and I really liked it. It actually had the pneumatic door on the side like a bus does. And at the time I liked that. I thought it gave you more space inside that you don't have to build around a large sliding door. I really liked it, quite frankly. I think it was about $27,000. The issue, however, was with that pneumatic door, that bus door, up the side, I guess it's maybe a fiberglass frame for that door, there was a big crack in it. But it gave us a good idea of what we were looking at, and Brian went with me and he was open, I guess. We also saw a Sprinter on that particular lot, and I think we realized that the Sprinters may just be too big. And we spoke with a neighbor of ours who's actually also had built out a van. He had a Promaster. His parents have two Mercedes, and Sprinter is a Mercedes. And they said, even just to get your oil changed, you'll be looking at $250, and that's before anything goes wrong. In addition, it's just hard to find a mechanic to work on it on the road. I would say that issue right there was why I kind of X'd out the Sprinters. There were two available in New York City. The dealership, when I called to speak to them, stated that they had been nursing home shuttles that had been turned in because with COVID, nobody was going anywhere, especially nursing home residents. They had been sold at the dealership. Two of them, one had a little less mileage on it. This one had 119 $12K, and they were priced roughly, I think 20 or 21 is what I actually paid for this one, which is that second one. The other one was a little more, again, had less mileage, but it was really, I just didn't like the shape it was in. There were dings everywhere. I don't recall what the service record was, but I definitely appreciated the service record on this one. It had been a work van in Virginia prior to going to that nursing home and had been converted to the shuttle bus for that reason. So it had some interesting quirks about it in that it had been made to be a shuttle after it had been manufactured. So there were some weird things, but it all worked out. I was absolutely looking for a window van when I was looking. I think I realized when we had a camper before that the camper had small windows, and once you got inside and shut the door, it didn't feel like you were camping anymore. You couldn't see outside. There wasn't a lot of light. Might as well just be sitting in an apartment somewhere. So I was looking for the windows, despite the fact I knew that an insulation could be an issue. I think it's a nicer van on the outside. It does look like a shuttle, so while there's definitely no stealth, there's maybe stealth on the opposite side of the coin in that people just think it's a shuttle bus rather than a work van trying to be a house. I don't know. Either way, it's got an awning and solar and 2 fans up top, so I don't believe it's stealth in any manner, and people know van lifers now. They know we're out there. And I don't park on streets like that. I'm either at a campsite or a rest stop or somewhere where I feel pretty safe with it. I had mentioned the sink being perhaps not as much of a necessity as I thought. I partially wish that I had put it, let me spin this, that I had put it in my cabinet here. I could have probably easily chosen a smaller pedestal sink to sit right here, or to drop in whatever maybe I could have done with that. The reason I didn't is because at the time I thought I had 2 5-gallon jerry cans I had to fit underneath, and the jerry cans being underneath was the issue. It was not the sink being on top. I also thought counter space was a huge issue. I've got plenty and I don't need all of it. If I could do the beds over, I may, and I have thought about even ripping this out to redo them a little bit, to do the 2 bench seats, but instead of them being strictly benches that you'd then transform into a full bed. And I think I would do both benches in the thin twin, do them to the side, and so there's a very thin walkway, and then it would cost me a little bit of storage in the garage. But I think if I had to do it over, that's what I would do. Mainly because it's quite the pain in the butt when you're up in this top bunk, whether there's someone on the bottom or not. It's a pain to get out of bed and pee in the middle of the night, or just to get out of bed, period. One thing I forgot to mention as I went over the garage and the battery space, the Bluetti, is that this builder knew full well the blueprint of the van. He knew that I was going to have the upper bed here. He knew we were not doing bench seats, but when we showed up, we were presented with this battery in a built box. I knew it was going to be in a box, but I truly thought they knew what they were doing and were going to plan accordingly with my blueprint. However, they gave me a box with a lid that cannot be opened when this bed was placed. And this is something I asked them about as soon as I saw it. I thought, well, how do I do that? It's kind of facing the wrong way. The box, all the buttons are on the front, and the box wall is blocking that front panel. The lid is not helpful because the buttons are on the side, not on the top. It was really a big fiasco, and they kind of just shrugged when we were picking the van up. And I'll tell you, there were a couple other issues, like the electrical outlets were just hanging because they thought that's what I wanted. I made them put them in the wall before we left, and they actually forgot one of our 12-volt outlets that is for the fridge up by the seat, and they had to put that in before we left. So there were a few issues that had to be dealt with, and that box was unfortunately the least of my concerns, because I thought I can at least go in and cut into that box if I need to make the appropriate access panels, which we did. Not 100% happy with that, but it is what it is. That builder, who I don't think I'll name here, not sure if I'll change my mind, did a fabulous job otherwise with everything that they put in this van. What I would ding them on heavily is their communication. I think they are so busy that we waited almost a year on a waiting list to get this in there. Their prices were okay. We only did a partial build. They are terrible with communication. They have not given me my receipt, which I wanted for insurance purposes. I've called them about 2 smaller issues that I had a concern about. They just won't get back to me. They will initially and say they'll look into it, then you don't hear from them again, which is luckily it's not a huge problem because these weren't huge issues that I needed resolved. But if I needed something fixed in a pinch, it would be a problem. So I hope this is helpful. If you have any questions about price, I'm more than willing to talk about it. I have no issues there. We roughly paid $21,000 for the actual partial build to be done by that professional builder. We did the rest. The Blue Eddy we paid for, I think we paid $3,000 maybe, and everything else we put in. Let me know if you have any questions. More than willing to answer.